Yes, absolutely. So I am not surprised that potentially a lot of your work focuses also on stress management. Am I correct?
Indeed, yes, that's one of my specialties. And especially because, regardless of the nature of the visit, someone's going to come to see me for a specific reason, and we can keep pain as our central example. There's a change happening in their life, and even as healing starts to reestablish, that is an ongoing and continuous change. Change is adaptation. And in physiology, by the way, stress is defined as the failure to adapt. And so the more that we can allow the person to adapt and evolve continuously, the less it's a stress on the system.
Mm.
Now, what tends to happen, the person living in the body is thinking, oh, well, what if this and what if that? And it stays more focused on the known or the familiar for obvious reasons. And then because can't imagine or doesn't want to imagine a different version of a reality that will influence the rhythm and the rate of adaptation, which in turn will be a stress and then will cause a vicious cycle.
Oh, yes.
So the more we can accompany the changes along the way, the more sustainable the healing process is. Not to say that we can't return to our favorite life and lifestyle. It's just that we might have to take a little detour and a little of a learning process along the way, which might make the familiar just new and improved when we go back to it.
Oh, yes. This so resonates with me because we've heard so many times the only constant in life is change, and we kind of understand it or know about it. But from my own personal experience, sometimes I just don't want to have that change because it's like, why again? It's almost like constantly we have to adapt, evolve, change, and sometimes you just want to be like, oh please, just give me some rest. I don't want to change today, I don't want to change this week. But in what you just said, it's about adapting to that change that actually affects the stress levels, and this in return, in a positive return, really help the physical body, right?
Course. Well, essentially, we're always evolving, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. Everything in nature is evolving. Every human organism, every living organism is always evolving. Now, do we evolve for the better and better, or do we get worse and worse, so to speak? Do we get better with age or not? Right? And so we can think of each new cycle of change could be a limiting cycle or a liberating cycle. And that in itself is within a certain sense of our own power. We have choices we can make and actions we can do that can influence that we get more and more free within our body, within ourselves as time evolves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe even just to make it less daunting for any of our listeners, it's not all or nothing. It doesn't mean from one day to the next I have to remake a whole life. It's very gradual, the change. That's why most of us don't notice it, and we think it's the same thing day to day. And as we say, time changes everything unless we inhibit it. And so if we get stuck in our own patterns, then it'll make the change again less of a fluid transition and more of a jump from one state to the other.
Thank you for saying that, because sometimes we really think in black and white, either 100% or zero, and we forget that this is a spectrum of everything. And one thing that resonates with me, and I started looking at change and life and growth, like in general, is like breathing. Sometimes when you breathe in, you expand, you go more outside, and then there are times when you need to exhale as well, and you go more inside. So it's like going in and out and in and out. And for me, it really, I don't know, it takes away that pressure of I have to be inhaling all the time, like You cannot. I mean, life doesn't work that way, right?
If you were to inhale all the time, you probably wouldn't last as long. um,
Exactly.
and just on that point, going back to the stress response is activated by the inhale, and the relaxation response is activated by the exhale. And you can't have one without the other. We can't have the inhale without the exhale. And if you go back to what you just finished saying, inhale is like taking in, taking in, taking in, and we have continuous stimulus without the time to process it and digest it. And so if we think of the analogy of an all-you-can-eat salad bar or all-you-can-eat food bar, it could be the best food, all local, organic, and made with love, and so on. And if I just eat nonstop, then even the best food won't get processed, digested, and assimilated, and it might cause more indigestion than the energy I need. Which reminds me, because at the beginning of the talk, you said your first yoga teacher, and right away I thought of one of my first yoga teachers, Dr. Bali, who said, it's not what the food does to your body, it's what your body does to the food. And the more I contemplate that and the more I teach it, the more I realize it applies to everything. So it's not what the experience does to the body, it's what the body does to the experience. And then that goes back into the subjective experience of pain, for example, or any emotion, any event that might have an impact on us. It's partly the multifactorial impact, and it's partly my choice of what I do with it. And in that way, it's very empowering.